Swiss Frankie.
Yeah, full tribe in the building. Full tribe static attic. Melchizedek media. Melchizedek music. Yeah, the push
www.swissfrankie.com.
Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused. Don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused. Israelite blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused. Hebrew we got next. I preach the Melchizedek. Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused. Don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused. Israelite blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused. Hebrews we got next, so never abandon your post.
Keep your eyes on the prize. I'm not talking about no dollar sign. The kingdom's at hand, that's the plan, my man. Spiritual gifts is what I store up. Waiting for the sun to show up. Then Babylon gon' burn up, and them gold streets gon' turn up. There'll be love for thy neighbor, will be heavenly favor. God, you love's what you get when you live in the script. So tune in to this vibration. We from his holy nation, here to give words to the ears that hear. Screaming Yahshua's coming till he appears. Cry loud and spare not bruise. Now that scripture, strong in the faith in this heavenly race. Washed by the blood of Yahweh Shah, that's grace.
Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused. Don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused. Israelite blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused. Hebrews we got next. I preach the Melchizedek. Stay focused. Yeah, how what we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused. Don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused. Israelite blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused. Hebrews we got next, so never abandon your post.
Shalom, Israel. This is your little brother Benai coming at you with part 3 of Neither Jew nor Gentile. Now, this lesson is going to be a pretty lengthy lesson, but it will be a very thorough lesson because I know that people have a hard time understanding how the Northern Kingdom became Gentiles. A lot of times when we read the book, when we get to the New Testament, we automatically assume that the Northern Kingdom is present with the Southern Kingdom during the time that Hamashiach, or who the world calls Jesus Christ, walked the earth. But that's simply not the case. So I took time out to put this lesson together, and the reason why it's lengthy is because I threw in every scripture to show you exactly how the Northern Kingdom became Gentiles and are the Gentiles that we read in the New Testament. Now, when you first start reading this book, it's very important that you read the book from cover to cover, right? But when you're ready to study and learn knowledge, to learn doctrine, there's a certain formula that we are commanded or instructed to use when studying this book, and it's written in the middle of the book. Isaiah 28, verses 9 through 10 reads, "Whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little." And that's what I did in this lesson right here. I used line upon line. We know that the word precept means command, right? But the line upon line are the verses or passages throughout the book. And one of the most important thing, if not the most important thing when studying the book, is the here a little and there a little, which means that you get X amount of information out of one book or one chapter, and then you might have to go to another book or another chapter on that same topic and get a little bit more information to add with that first information. And then you'll go to another book or another chapter and get more information on that same topic, right? And you will gather all those informations out that's scattered throughout the book. And once you put them together, sort of like a puzzle piece, you'll get the proper understanding of what's being said about that particular topic that you're studying. So, like I said, in this study, we use line upon line to go through this lesson to show you exactly how the northern kingdom becomes Gentiles. And after this lesson, it should be very clear as possible, I would imagine, for you to understand exactly how the northern kingdom became Gentiles and that they are the Gentiles that are talked about in the New Testament. So let's get right into it. Previously, on neither Jew nor Gentile. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Ah, one of the world's most famous verses. But what does that mean? Do we truly have proper understanding on what is a Jew and what is a Gentile? Surely we see slaves and free, and of course there's male and female. So what does this verse truly mean? And here's a better question. If there is neither Jew nor Gentile, then why would the world bother to hide who the true children of Israel, or the so-called Jews, really are? All right, so let's do a quick recap on Neither Jew nor Gentiles, part one, where we learn who the Israelites are, which were the 12 tribes prior to the divided monarchy. Then that term only pertained to the northern kingdom after the division, after King Solomon, and it was only extended to the southern kingdom after the Babylonian captivity. We learned who the lost tribes of Israel are, and those were the tribes of the northern kingdom who was carried away to Assyria in 720 BC. They were recorded to have been absorbed or assimilated into the other nations. Their descendants are believed to be many nations today, and they're prophesied to be gathered and returned to the land at the coming of the Messiah. We also learned what the term Jew meant, which is Yahudi. These are descendants of Judah, or they're also citizens of the southern kingdom. We know that they were carried away to Babylon approximately 150 years after the northern kingdom went to Assyria. But the difference is the southern kingdom returned home from exile. They did about a 70-year bid in captivity, and then they came home. And we also learned who the Samaritans are, which was a group of foreigners who were transplanted into Samaria by the king of Assyria, and they were reported to come from Cutha, Avar, Hamath, Sepharvaim, and Arabia. So that was a quick recap on Neither Jew nor Gentile part one, and we'll do just a quick run through of what we learned on Neither Jew nor Gentile part two. In part two, we learned that the Gentiles is a term that means goy, right? Hebrews 1471, I believe, and it means all nations. It also means heathens, right? So the all nations, that means every nation, including the Israelites, are considered to be goy or Gentiles. Now, that term usually is applied to non-Hebrew people, right? But it could also mean Israelites. So we went through Neither Jew nor Gentile part two, just to show that the term Gentiles didn't only apply to the sons of Japhet, but every tribe or nation of people is considered a Gentile because that term Gentile only means nation, people, um, heathen, and really race. That's what it means. So now that we got all that, let's go on to part three of our study. The northern kingdom becomes Gentiles, i.e., the 10 lost tribes. Now, the first thing that we're going to go through is that we're going to learn the prophecy that the northern kingdom would become Gentiles. Many people don't know that it was already prophesied in the beginning that the northern kingdom would become Gentiles. The Most High said he declares the end from the beginning. He told you in the beginning what was going to happen in the end. And we also know that his word shall not come back void. So whatever he prophesy or whatever he say shall come to pass, guess what? It will come to pass. So let's go into the prophecy that Grandpa Israel, aka Jacob, gave to his two grandsons and how he prophesied that they would become a nation, plural, nations of Gentiles or nations of nations. Check it out. So starting at Genesis 48, verse 8, we read, And Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, Who are these? And Joseph said unto his father, They are my sons, whom Yah hath given me in this place. And he said, Bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so that he could not see. And he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them, and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face, and lo, Yah hath showed me also thy seed. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, Yah, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the Yah which fed me all my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. Okay, so let's go back and look at this real fast. So in verse 16, right, we see Israel already prophesying that he asked, to let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth, right? Then when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon Ephraim, it displeased him, because the custom was to give the blessing to the firstborn. But we see many times in this Bible that the blessing always, seemed to always went to the secondborn, right? But Israel knew exactly what he was doing. So, Joseph was like, hey, wait a minute, Pop. Manasseh's the oldest. Put, your right hand on him and your left hand on Ephraim. But let's see what Grandpa Israel did, or what he said. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. So you see, Grandpa Israel, he knew exactly what he was doing, and he told his son, look, I know what I'm doing. And don't worry, Manasseh will be a great people. You see, he said he shall become a people, and also shall be great. But he said, Ephraim, his younger brother, shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations with an S, a plural, right? Which is the same word as Gentile. Hebrews 1:4-7-1, which means goy. So think about that for a second. You had the 12 sons of Israel. As far as we know, every last one of the sons became just one nation, right? Judah's one nation, Benjamin's one nation. But he said that these will be a multitude of nations with an S, prophesying and showing you from the beginning, declaring in the end that they will be a multitude of Gentiles, which is the same word as nations, Hebrews 1:4-7-1. A lot of people miss this in the beginning. A lot of people, we gloss over it and we just keep reading and we don't understand. So I wanted to show you that prophecy in the beginning of how it was already prophesied that they will become Gentiles in Genesis 48. Now, let's go into how the northern kingdom became divorced from the Most High. So let's go from when Israel blessed the two sons, and let's fast forward all the way through the Exodus and all the way through Joshua and coming into the land and all the way through Saul and all the way through King David and Solomon and the split of the kingdom, right? Let's fast forward all the way up to where the northern kingdom started to backslide and rebel against the Most High. Now, Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 8 reads, "And I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also." So the Most High, and remember what we learned in video one or part one, is that Israel only pertained to the northern kingdom after the split of the monarchy all the way up until they were carried away to Assyria. So whenever we read the words Israel, that's referring to the northern kingdom, as well as the word Ephraim. The word Ephraim, it what word am I looking for? It includes all the northern kingdom. Just like he will say Judah, which would include the southern kingdom, even though Judah is just one tribe. So like when you get to Ezekiel 37 and you're reading about the two sticks coming together, he'll say the stick of Ephraim and the stick of Judah, which Ephraim and his companions, which would be the other 9 tribes, and it'll say, and Judah and his companions, which will be the other 2 or 1.5 tribes that makes up all 12 tribes when they come together. So let's go and see exactly how or why the Most High gave the northern kingdom a bill of divorce. Now, going back to 2 Kings, which we went through in the first video, we're going to go through it again, just in case some people missed exactly what happened and why the Most High divorced the northern kingdom. Excuse me. So we're going to start in 2 Kings chapter 17, starting at verse 6. And it reads, "In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against Yah their Elohim, which had brought them out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom Yah cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made." So in verse 7, we see right here, the reason why he divorced them, right? And there's more to it. We're going to get into it, but he said, for so it was, for this is the reason why they were carried away, that the children of Israel or the northern kingdom had sinned against Yah their Elohim, right? And they had feared other gods, and they walked in the statutes of the heathen. So they were already in the process of being Gentiles. Like they were taking after the custom of the non-Hebrews, of the other nations, right? This is what they wanted to do. And we're going to show that without a doubt in this lesson. So let's go to verses 9 through 11. And it says, and the children of Israel did secretly those things that were not right against Yah, their Elohim. And they built them high places in all their cities, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced city. And they set them up images and groves in every high hill and under every green tree. And there they burnt incense in all the high places, as did the heathen, whom Yah carried away before them, and wrought wicked things to provoke Yah to anger. So, they were worshiping other gods in secret. They built high places in all their cities. High places, these are places of worship, right? These are little temples. These are little, not just temples, but little altars and stuff that they built all over the place, that they set up, images so that they could worship the gods of the other nations, or the gods of the heathens in this case. See, like we said in part 2 of Neither Jew nor Gentiles, when he uses the word heathen, which is the same word as Gentile, we know from the gate that he's talking about non-Israelites. He's talking about people who don't worship him, right? We talking about people who are not his people, and he is not their God. This is why the northern kingdom was divorced, because they were worshiping the other people's gods, right? So let's continue. Let's go on to verses 12 through 14. And it reads, for they served idols, whereof Yah had said unto them, ye shall not do this thing. Yet Yah testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, turn ye from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the necks of their fathers that did not believe in Yah, their Elohim. So the northern kingdom, they served idols, right? And the Most High warned them, but he didn't just warn them, he warned Judah as well. But the difference between Judah and Israel is that Judah eventually always turned back, or the southern kingdom, even though when, they started going off and it says, and they sinned again, the southern kingdom would always eventually repent and come back to the Most High. But the northern kingdom refused to repent and refused to come back to the Most High. And I'm going to show you that using line upon line as commanded in Isaiah 28, and show you them really telling the Most High to his face that they're not coming back, that they wanted to be Gentiles, right? And in 14, it says, notwithstanding, they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers that did not believe in Yah, their Elohim. Now, when you get to Romans, like Romans chapter 30, you're going to see that Paul is talking to who you think is, Japhite or other nation Gentiles, but you'll realize once you study this that he's talking to the northern kingdom, because he tells them, because of your disbelief, right? You were not granted mercy, but now you're granted mercy. Well, this is that disbelief that he was talking about, because the northern kingdom, it says right here, they did not believe in Yah, their Elohim, right? So when you get to Romans 30, which we're going to probably get into later, a little bit down the road, but just keep that in mind that, So the northern kingdom, they worshiped other gods, they served idols, right? They went and returned back to the Most High, right? And they did not believe in the Most High. This is the reason why he gave them a bill of divorce and how they became Gentiles. But let's continue. So verses 15 and 16 says, and they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers and his testimonies which he testified against them. And they followed vanity and became vain and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom Yah had charged them that they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of Yah their Elohim and made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove and worshiped all the hosts of heaven and served Baal. So look what they did. They rejected his statutes, right? And his covenant that he made with their fathers. They said we're no. I know that we have a contract or deal because that's another word for covenant is a contract or an agreement. But nah, we're not following that contract. We're not following that agreement. We renege on that, right? A lot of you know what that word renege. We renege on this contract, right? And they went after the heathen that were round about. They wanted to be like the heathen. It's like, you know, a child of yours that you give a certain charge and you tell them, you know what I'm saying? You, I grew up with a couple friends who were, say, Jehovah's Witness, and you know they couldn't do certain things like Christmas and everything like that. You know, like in my ignorant age, I celebrated Christmas before I was introduced to this truth, right? But my friends who couldn't, right, they used to look out the window at us and come over the house and be like, oh man, you guys celebrate Christmas and everything. I want to be like you. And eventually, as they got older and got a little bit more freedom, they forsook their previous religion or the religion of their fathers, you know what I mean, that their parents held, and wanted to be like to their parents, we were heathens. You know what I mean? So they wanted to be like us and come do Christmas. And we were heathens, truth be told, at that time. We were heathens. And, they wanted to come and do it because it looked fun, right? And for whatever reason, the northern kingdom wanted to be like the other nations. And they went and made molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove and worshiped all the hosts of heaven. Not just some of them, all the hosts of heaven. Now, if you understand what this means, all the hosts of heaven, these are the fallen angels. These are the angels, right? Not just the angels, but what they call the planets in the sky, Saturn and Jupiter. Just they was worshiping everything, and they served Baal, and we know who Baal is, right? That's the Lord. So as we go on, and he said, and they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divinations and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of Yah to provoke him to anger. Therefore, Yah was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah. So, for all these things that the northern kingdom did, because, they didn't believe, they rejected the covenant, they refused to come back, they threw away the commandments, they wanted to be like the heathens, they worshiped the host of heavens or the angels in heavens. They served Baal. They caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire, and they did use divination and enchantments. They set up golden calves, and worshiped those golden calves. And for this reason, the Most High got angry, and he gave them a bill of divorce, like we read in Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 8. So these are the reasons why the northern kingdom was divorced. But you have to keep in mind that in Genesis 48, the Most High had already said that he was going to make them Gentiles, right? That they will be great nations, right? Plural. So those things had to come to pass. He knew that they were going to come to pass. This is just how it came to pass. So let's look further into seeing, the result of all this and how the northern kingdom became Gentiles. And like I said, I used a lot of scripture to show so that it'll be beyond a shadow of a doubt. So that at the end of this lesson, you should be like, yes, the northern kingdom was definitely divorced. They definitely, they surely did not return after the Assyrians carried them away captive. Part of the reason was because they didn't want to return, but we're going to go into all of that right now. So, the best book to go into to learn all that is the book of Hosea. Now, the book of Hosea is about 97% about the northern kingdom, right? It's a little bit about the southern kingdom, but the bulk of the book is about the northern kingdom. And so I took time to try to break it down into 4 categories, right? But each category is kind of 2 or 3 things in it. But just so that you know, because I believe there's 13 chapters in that book, right? So I took time to break it down, and I had to put them together line upon line, here a little and there a little, so that you could get the proper understanding of what happened to the northern kingdom. So the 4 sections I broke them down into is the first section we're going to go over is, the northern kingdom being a divorced wife and how their children were rejected and how they were said to be no more priests. Now, if you remember in Deuteronomy, the Most High told the children of Israel that, if I will be your God and you shall be my people and you shall be a priest unto me, right? So that was the whole goal and purpose of the children of Israel, to be a priest. Well, if they're no more a priest unto them, then what are they? Right? You got to ask yourself that. What are they, right? The second section that we're going to go into is how he said they would have no king, right? And he said no punishment. Now that's important too, because in other passages, the Most High says that he only chastises his own, meaning that if he doesn't punish you for the things that you do, it's because you're not his, right? So to show you how much that they were no longer his, he said he wasn't even going to punish them no more. Let them do what they want, right? Because he had divorced them. He had cast them away. And he said he was going to take away their feast days. So that's the second part. And then the third part we're going to get into is to show how the northern kingdom refused to return, right? They didn't want to come back. And how they became Gentiles / wanderers among the nations. And the last part we're going to talk about is when they come back, how they'll come back, right? They'll be betrothed in the wilderness. And as we get to that, you'll see exactly what I mean. And you'll have to ask yourself, has this happened yet? Right? So now, before we go into that, we're going to do a little history on the book of Hosea to get the timeline to figure out when exactly did Hosea live, right? Because if Hosea lived after the Assyrian captivity or the Babylonian captivity, then when he says the children of Israel, he must be talking about the southern kingdom. But if he lived prior to the Babylonian captivity and prior to the Assyrian captivity, then you'll know when he used the term the children of Israel, you'll know he's talking about the northern kingdom. That's why we went through exactly who are the Israelites, who are the 10 lost tribes, who are the Jews, and who are the Samaritans in part 1, so that when we get to this part, when we read the prophets, we know who he's talking to. And another tip is when you're reading the prophets, find out the timeline of when the prophets lived, when they prophesied. When was that? So that you will have a better understanding of who they're talking to, right? Because when you get to the book of Ezekiel, he also uses the term the children of Israel, but this is now during the Babylonian captivity where the term children of Israel applies to the southern kingdom, but that's a different story. So let's just move on to this one and check this out. Now, this is from the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? And it says Hosea, right? The first of the 12 Old Testament books that bear the name of the minor prophet. They call him a minor prophet because they have little understanding. You know, there's no such thing as minor or major prophet, right? It's considered as one book, the 12 in the Jewish canon. According to the subscription, Hosea began his prophetic activity during the reign of Jeroboam, which is 786 to 746 BC. Now remember, the northern kingdom went into captivity in 722 BC, right? Matter of fact, it says that's right here. His prophetic announcement indicates that he was active until near the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel, the scene of his entire ministry, 722 BC. So it said Hosea prophesied in the northern kingdom, right? Somewhere between 786 BC until they were carried away to Assyria in 721 BC. So when he used the term children of Israel, it pertained to the northern kingdom alone, because this is prior to the Assyrian captivity. And also, the northern kingdom in the book of Hosea is often referred to as Ephraim, who the Most High had said will become a multitude of nations, according to Genesis 48. So now that we got that understanding, let's see how the northern kingdom became a divorced wife, right? How her children were rejected and they were no more a priest. And we're going to do this using line upon line, here a little and there a little. So we're going to be jumping from chapter to chapter, pulling a little bit here and a little bit there so we could get a clear understanding on exactly how these things had came to pass, right? Now, in Hosea 2, verses 2 through 7, we see that it reads, it says, plead with your mother, plead for she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. Let her therefore put away her whoredom out of her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts, lest I strip her naked, and set her as in the day that she was born, and make her as a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst. And I will not have mercy upon her children, for they be the children of whoredoms. So the Most High said, she is not my wife, and I'm not her husband, because she's a whore. Why is she a whore? Because she worshiped, right, idols and all the host of heaven, right? That's spiritual fornication. That is what made her a whore. So Hosea was prophesying this and telling this to the northern kingdom prior to the Assyrian king coming and taking them away. But of course, they didn't listen. So let's go on to verses 5 through 7. Right? So now, verses 5, it says, for their mother hath played the harlot. She that conceived them have done shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers that gave me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, mine oil and my drink. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up thy way with thorns, and make a wall that she shall not find her path. And she shall follow after her lovers, but she shall not overtake them. And she shall seek them, but shall not find them. Then she shall say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then was it better with me than now. So this is the reason why that the Most High had rejected her children in verse 4. I will not have mercy upon her children, for they be the children of whoredoms, because she conceived these children from her lovers, which were the other gods that she worshiped. She played the harlot and she gave her children. Remember, he said that, they passed their children through the fire. Their children were dedicated to the other gods. So he was saying that these aren't even my children. I want you to imagine this on a carnal level right now. Although this is spiritual, but it should be easy to imagine on a carnal level. Her children were conceived, right, through her fornication with the other gods. So they thought those other gods was their God or their father. Just like we call the Most High our Father. Well, those children came up and were born and were worshiping the idols that they had on those hilltops and under every green tree. They were born and they grew up worshiping the calves that they had. So they thought that that was their gods. So they weren't the Most High's children. They were children conceived out of whoredom. And she shall follow after her lovers. She wanted to go after her lovers, but he said that he was going to, block her path, and she would not be able to overtake them. And eventually she will say, I will go and return to my first husband, right? So we see an example. We see exactly how, she's a divorced wife and her children are rejected. So let's continue. Now, jumping to Hosea chapter 4, verses 1 through 6, we get a better understanding on those topics that we were reading, right? So, verse 1 reads, Hear the word of Yah, ye children of Israel. So we know we're talking about the northern kingdom. For Yah have a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of Yah in the land. Why isn't there any knowledge of Yah in the land? Because they grew up believing that those other idols and those hosts of heavens were their God. So they didn't have knowledge of the Most High Yah. And by swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out, and blood touches blood. Therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwelleth therein shall languish, with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven. Yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. So the Most High said he's taken all of that away, right? Because his wife, is creeping on him, so to speak, right? Verse 4 reads, Yet let no man strive, nor reprove another, for thy people are as they that strive with the priests. Therefore shalt thou fall in the day, and the prophet also shall fall with thee in the night. And I will destroy thy mother. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of Yah. I will also forget thy children. So in verses 4 through 6, we see that he said he would destroy thy mother. Who's thy mother? Northern kingdom, right? The 10 lost tribes. He was going to cut them off, right? And we read this all the time. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And we apply it to anything that we want to apply it to. But in this context right here, he was saying, like, look, the northern kingdom, they don't know me. They worship these other gods, right? Even their children were born worshiping these other gods, right? They came up thinking Baal and Murdoch and all these other gods were their God, right? And he said, because they have rejected him and rejected knowledge, he also will reject them, and they shall be no priest to me. So if you're not a priest to him and you're rejected by him, right? Because he called the children of Israel to become priests for him. But if you're not being what he called you to do, then what are you? What are you? Right? If he cut you off and said, look, I don't even want you to be that no more, then what are you? You're a Gentile, right? You're one of the nations. You're a Gentile in the non-Hebrew or non-Israelite sense of the term. And he said, I will also forget thy children, which is cold. So we're going to jump again, and we're going to go to Hosea chapter 8, using line upon line to get more understanding of how the northern kingdom became a divorced wife, how her children shall be rejected, and how they shall be no more a priest, right? Using line upon line. So we're going to Hosea 8, starting at verse 1. It says, Set the trumpet to thy mouth, He shall come as an eagle against the house of Yah, because they have transgressed my covenant and trespassed against my law. Israel shall cry unto me, my Yah, we know thee. Israel hath cast off the things that is good. The enemy shall pursue him. They have set up kings, but not by me. They have made princes, and I know it not. Of their silver and their gold have they made them idols, that they may be cut off. So the Most High said, he's sound the trumpet, right? Because he's sending the Assyrians up against the house of Israel, right? Why? Because they have transgressed my covenant and trespassed against my law. He said they're going to cry to him and say, we know thee, but they have already cast off the thing that is good, which is the covenant, right? Which is the law, which is the culture, right? The enemy shall pursue them, right? He said they set up kings who weren't appointed by him. They made whoever they wanted to make king, right? And if you read the story, you'll find out that the kingship was taken over treacherously. One person will be king, and then somebody would come and kill him and become king. You know what I mean? And then somebody in his party, so to speak, or in his council will kill him and become king. And it was just chaos. Now, at least with the children of Judah or the southern kingdom, all their kings were of the same bloodline. All their kings were descendants of David, right? Staying true to the promise that the Most High said that He will always have a seed of David on the throne, right? But the Northern Kingdom, it was like, look, if you got to the king and was able to take him out, guess what? You're the king, and it was like anybody could be king, right? So none of the kings were ordained by the Most High, right? None of the princes were ordained by the Most High. And then the silver and their gold they made them idols, that they might be cut off. So they were just wilding out, the Northern Kingdom, wilding out, really desperately trying to be like the heathens. So jumping to Hosea chapter 9, verses 1 through 4, again using line upon line, we read, rejoice not, O Israel. This is the Northern Kingdom, for joy as other people. For thou hast gone a horn from thy Elohim. Thou hast loved a reward upon every corn floor. The floor and the winepress shall not feed them, and the new wine shall fail in her. They shall not dwell in Yah's land, but Ephraim shall return to Egypt, and they shall eat unclean things in Assyria. They shall not offer wine offerings to Yah, neither shall they be pleasing unto him. Their sacrifices shall be unto them as bread of mourners. All that eat thereof shall be polluted, for their bread, for their soul shall not come into the house of Yah. So he's telling the Northern Kingdom, oh, don't rejoice like the other people rejoice, because there's something coming for you. He said, you shall not dwell in Yah's land, but Ephraim. Now you see how Ephraim right here, this is not just the tribe of Ephraim. This is referring to all the Northern Kingdom being referred to as Ephraim. And it says, they shall return to Egypt or bondage or slavery, and they shall eat unclean things in Assyria. They shall not offer wine to the Most High, neither shall they be pleasing unto him, like he's done with them. Their sacrifices shall be unto them as the bread of mourners, and whoever eat it shall be polluted. And they weren't even sacrificing to the Most High anyway. They were sacrificing to other, little g gods, right? Idols and stuff like that. And he said, for their bread, the bread for their soul shall not come into the house of Yah. What's the bread of their soul? Isn't that the word? Isn't that the word that you need to hear for redemption? Isn't that the word that you need to hear for salvation? Yeah, it's not coming to them no more. He's cutting them off, right? So those are the using line upon line that showed you how the northern kingdom became a divorced wife, how their children were rejected, and how they will no more be a priest to them. Right? So remember those four categories that we said we're going to go over. Now, let's look at the second category, which is they shall have no king, no more punishment because he only chastises his own, and no more feast days. So we're going to get straight into that, and we're going to go to Hosea chapter 1. Now we're jumping back to chapter 1, right? Because we're using line upon line, but more importantly, we're using here a little and there a little. So we're going to be jumping back and forth so that you can see that. So now we're going to show how he said they would no longer have a king, right? They would no longer receive punishment for their sins because he only chastised his own, and how they would no longer have any more feast days. So it says, Hosea chapter 1, starting at verse 2, we're going to read 2 through 5. It says, the beginning of the word of Yah by Hosea. And Yah said to Hosea, go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children's of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departing from Yah. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, which conceived and bare him a son. And Yah said unto him, call his name Jezreel, for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. And it shall come to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. So you see right here that the Most High said, to name his son Jezreel, and you would have to read the story of Jezreel to know who he was, a man that was slaughtered in between the altars, right, unjustly, by the house of Jehu, right? And he said, this is the reason why he's going to do that, right? And he's going to cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. He was going to bring their kingdom to an end. And we know that happened when they were carried away by the Assyrians in 720 BC, and they never returned to reestablish their kingdom, right? So we're going to go on, again, using line upon line. We're going to drop down to verses 9 through 11, and now we're going to another chapter, chapter 2. We're going to just read verses 9 through 11 to show how their feast days were cut off, right? So he says, verse 9, therefore will I return and take away my corn in the time thereof, and my wine in the season thereof, and will recover my wool and my flax given to cover her nakedness. And now will I discover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and none shall deliver her out of mine hand. I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all of her solemn feasts. Now, we read the beginning of this chapter in the first category when we showed that how she was going to be divorced. And she had said that she had, she thought she got her corn and her wine and her flax from her lovers, right? But he said that she didn't know that she got it from me. But since she is out there cheating on me, or since she's out there running around being a harlot, I'm going to come and I'm going to take away my corn, right? I'm going to take away my wine, and I will recover my wool and my flax, given to cover her nakedness. And now I will discover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers. When I read this, it reminds me of the song about Orange Juice Jones, right? I saw you and him walking in the rain. And at the end of the song, he started, talking trash, like, give me that fur coat and everything and them earrings I bought you. Give all that back. You know what I'm saying? And if you ever seen the video, at the end of the video, she's sitting outside on the curb in the rain, and she don't look nothing like she did when she was with Orange Juice Jones, right? So this is what the Most High said. He said, he's, he's like, he's taking away the things that he gave her, and he's going to put her back to who she was before he brought her out of Egypt. She was nothing. She was nothing. He brought her in, he took her into his house, right? He covered her. He gave her diamonds and pearls and made her look gorgeous. And it went to her head, and she went out and started whoring with other guys. So he divorced her. And he took all those things back, right? But the most important part in here in verse 11, he said, I will also cause mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. So she was no more her feast. She's not going to keep the feast days, the Passover, the first fruits, the feast of unleavened bread, the tabernacles. None of that. She was going to keep none of her new moon feasts, not even the Sabbath. He was going to cause all that to cease, and all of her solemn feasts, the Day of Atonement, and things like that. He was going to cause them all to cease. Because you want to be a Gentile, then go out there and be a Gentile. That's what the Most High really said. Here, give me all that stuff back, and you forsake and go out there and be like the other nations. Right? Now, still using line upon line, we're going to jump to chapter 4, verse 13. And remember, we're showing in this section how that they will no more have kings. They will no longer be punished, right? Because he only punished his own, and they will no longer have feast days, right? So Hosea chapter 4, reading 13 through 17, it reads, they sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains and burn incense upon the hills, under oaks and poplars and elms, because the shadow thereof is good. Therefore your daughters shall commit whoredom, and your spouses shall commit adultery. I will not punish your daughters when they commit whoredom, nor your spouses when they commit adultery. For themselves are separated with whores, and they sacrifice with harlots. Therefore the people have doth not understand shall fall. So he's not even punishing them anymore, because he's done with them, right? He's done with them. Sort of like how you have a child and you put your child out. You want to be out there in the streets and you want to run around with them knuckleheads out there in the streets. Well, you can't do it in my house. See you, bye. And he put them out. Go do what you want. And that's what happened. This is how the Northern Kingdom became Gentiles. And like I said, at the end of this lesson, it should be very, very clear, right? Now, continuing on, using line upon line, we're going to jump down to verses 15 and 17, right? So it said, so it says, though thou, Israel, play the harlot, yet let not Judah offend, and come not ye unto Gilgal, neither go ye up to Bethaven, nor swear, Yahuwah liveth, for Israel slideth back as a backsliding heifer. Now Yah will feed them as a lamb in a large place. Ephraim is joined to idols. Let him alone. So the Most High, like I said, he said he's done with y'all. You are joined to idols. You want to be like the nations. You plan to harlot to the other gods. Let him alone, right? I'm done with them. Continuing on, we want to jump to Hosea chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, right? And we're showing how that they were cut off. No more king, no more feast days, and no more punishment, because he's done with them and they're cut off, right? So starting at Hosea chapter 8, verse 1. Set the trumpet to thy mouth. He shall come as an eagle against the house of Yah, because they have transgressed my covenant and trespassed against my law. Israel shall cry unto me, my Yah, we know thee. Israel have cast off the thing that is good. The enemy shall pursue him. They have set up kings, but not by me. They have made princes, and I knew it not. For their silver and their gold have they made them idols, that they might be cut off, right? I know we read this in the first section, but this also applies to the second section, just to show you how they have been cut off, right? No more kings, no more punishment, no more feast days. And if you add that to the first section, no more wife, their children shall be rejected, right? So we're going to continue and move on. We're going to jump to chapter 10 and read verses 14 and 15, showing you again how Israel had been cut off from the covenant, right? Because when you get to the New Testament, you know, Paul says to the Gentiles, at one time you were a stranger to the covenant without Christ. Who was a stranger to the covenant without? This is the northern kingdom who were cut off from the covenant. And we're going to read that. So Hosea chapter 10, verses 14 through 15. Therefore shall a tumult arise among thy people, and all thy fortress shall be spoiled, as Shalman spoiled Betharbel in the day of battle. The mother was dashed in pieces upon her children. So shall Bethel do unto you because of your great wickedness. In a morning shall the king of Israel utterly be cut off. Showing you how the no more king, right? If there's no more king, there's no more kingdom. They all got carried away to Assyria. So let's continue to show in this category, right? Now we're going to jump back to Hosea 3, verses 4 through 5, right? And this right here is, you know, this should make everything clear. These two verses right here should make everything clear, but there's more to come after that. But this should make everything clear that the northern kingdom was cut off completely without the covenant, without the law, without feast days, without uh, uh, new moons, without everything, right? Because Hosea chapter 3, verses 4 through 5 read, for the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice, and without an image, and without an ephod, without teraphim. Afterward, right? He said, afterward shall the children of Israel return and seek Yah their Elohim and David their king, and shall fear Yah and his goodness in the latter days. That's the key right there, in the latter days. So he said they're going to be without a king, right? Without a prince, right? Without a sacrifice, no priest, no nothing. He said he ain't accepting their sacrifice. Without an image, right? The image is the, I believe it's the altar that they would sacrifice upon. The ephod, right? This is the garment or the dress wear that the priest would wear with the 12 stones of Israel on it. He said they'll be without that, right? He said without teraphim, and afterwards shall they come and seek Yah their Elohim and David their king. Now, when he say David their king, this is during the time of Jeroboam, right? When Hosea prophesied, remember? So David had been dead a long time ago. So we know that this is Hamashiach. Now, how do we know that this isn't Hamashiach, or who they call Jesus the Christ in the New Testament? Well, Jesus the Christ in the New Testament, he wasn't the king yet, right? Right? He wasn't the, they knew a king would be born, but he wasn't declared the king yet, right? As a matter of fact, when he was killed and they buried him, they mocked him and said, here go your king, right? But it said in the latter days, the northern kingdom will return and seek David their king, who is Hamashiach. This hasn't happened yet. This should be the you know the dagger, or this should be the end all be all on the question of how or if the northern kingdom became Gentiles. Because remember, this is Hosea, so when he say children of Israel, he's talking about the northern kingdom. And they went to Assyria, and they never had a king again, nor a prince, no priest, none of that, right? So as you can see here, through this section, using line upon line, we showed how they would no longer have a king, would no longer have be, punished for their sins, right? You know what I mean? Because They're not there. He's going to just let whatever happens to them, right? Not to say that they're getting all blessings, but their punishment is actually going to be being without him, right? Which is the greatest punishment, the punishment we're kind of serving right now to this day because of the sins of our forefathers. But they would not return until the latter days. So we're going to go into the third part of this section and show how the northern kingdom refused to return, how they became Gentiles and wanderers. Remember, to them, it wasn't even a punishment that he cut them off. They didn't want to come back. They were bold with it, right? They didn't want to serve the Most High. If you remember in part one, when we read when the kingdom was split up to Jeroboam and Rehoboam, right? When they went to Rehoboam and said, could you be kind to us and don't be as mean as your father was? And he said, no, I'm gonna be meaner than my father was. You know what I mean? I'm really gonna stick it to y'all. And they were like, well, what do we have to do with you, house of David? Let us go back to our tents. Like they were done with serving the Most High from that point on. They were done. And they didn't want to come back. They wanted to serve it. They wanted to be like the other Gentiles. They wanted to be like the other nations. And we're going to pull that out and show that right here using line upon line, again, all throughout the book of Hosea. So going to Hosea chapter 7, verses 8 through 10, right? It reads, Ephraim has mixed himself among the people. Not that the Most High mixed him among the people. He mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned. Strangers have devoured his strength, and he knoweth it not. Yea, gray hairs are here and there upon him, yet he knoweth it not. Now, what that means right there is like, he's been used, devoured up. You know how you get used by your friends and you don't know that they're taking advantage of you? You know what I'm saying? This is what happened to Ephraim, and they knew it not. And it said, gray hairs are here. Like he grew old and still just didn't realize he was being used. He was like these nations already hated Israel, right? But they convinced Ephraim or the northern kingdom to join them just to see their demise. It's kind of silly of Ephraim, right? And it says, and the pride of Israel testified to his face. To whose face? The Most High's face. It said, the pride of Israel testifieth to his face. Well, what did they testify to his face? And they do not return to Yah their Elohim, nor seek him for all this. They, look, we're not coming back. We don't want to come back, right? We're cool over here. We don't want to come back. We don't want to serve you, the Most High. We're cool. We want to be Gentiles. And that might sound crazy to some of y'all, but if you use it line upon line, you're going to see that because we're going to go to these next verses or these next passages and see that's exactly what they did. Starting at Hosea chapter 7, same chapter, verses 11 through 14. And it says, Ephraim also is like a silly dove without heart. Remember, we said they're silly because they don't even realize that they're going to be used by the nations, right? You ever see somebody who other people's just using them, but they're just so desperate to have friends, right? So desperate to be liked, so desperate to be accepted that they let the people use them. And they seem like they're oblivious to that, right? And we on the outside looking at him, we like, look at this silly, you know what I'm saying? This silly dude over here, man. He don't even realize it. That's why he said that the hairs on his head grow gray. And he's old and he still don't realize that he's been being used, right? So in 11, he says, Ephraim is also like a silly dove without heart. They call to Egypt, they go to Assyria. When they shall go, I will spread my net upon them. I will bring them down as the fowls of the heaven. I will chastise them as their congregation hath heard. Woe unto them, for they have fled from me. They fled from the Most High. They was trying to get away from the Most High, They didn't want to be under the Most High, right? So he said, for that, woe unto them, destruction unto them, because they have transgressed against me. Though I have redeemed them, yet they have spoken lies against me, and they have not cried unto me with their heart. When they howled upon their beds, they assembled themselves for corn and wine, and they rebel against me. Now imagine how the Most High feels at this point. He said, I didn't redeem these son of a guns out of Egypt, took them out of slavery, dressed them up, got them looking good. They the top nation of the earth, people coming from all over the world to hear the wisdom of Solomon and see the gold of David and things like that. And what they do? They spoke lies against me. They talk about how they are, murmuring about the Most High. They have not cried upon their bed. They rebelled against me. He said, for they have fled from me. Now, how ungrateful can you be? Right? And we see that in everyday life. You help somebody out or even the Most High help you out. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we pray for something. We go, oh, Most High, please do this for me, do that for me. And then he does it. And then when he do it, what you do? You forget about the Most High, right? You ain't praying no more. You even get to the point where you feel like you did it yourself. You don't need the Most High. What are you talking about? I got this because of my skills, because of my knowledge, or whatever the case. So this is what happened with Ephraim. They got beside themselves. They started smelling themselves. They started feeling themselves and started chasing after other gods, right? So let's continue on. Jump into Hosea chapter 11, using line upon line, verses 3 to 5. Remember, we're showing how they refuse to return, right? Verse 3 says, I taught Ephraim, which is the northern kingdom, also to go, taking them by their arms, but they knew not that I healed them. I drew them with cords of a man, with bands of love, and I was to them as they that take off the yoke on their jaws. And I laid meat unto them. He shall not return into the land of Egypt, and the Assyrian shall be his king, because they refuse to return. Right? So he said, look, this is what he did for Ephraim. He took them by their arms and their hands, and he healed them from their pains, and he drew them with cords of a man and bands of love, and then he took the yoke out of their jaws. Like, could you imagine, like you're a mule being mistreated and abused on the field and just being overworked and dragged and your jaws busted up and it's bloody because of the yoke that's in between your teeth that they use to steer you, to turn you to the left and to the right, right? They pull the left side to turn you to the left, and they pull the right side to turn you to the right to steer you, and your jaw's swollen and sore and you can't do nothing. You got this yoke. Well, the Most High came and freed them from that, right? Right? He had compassion for them. He took the yoke out of their mouth, and then he laid meat unto them, right? And they refused to return. After he did all that, they turn around and do this stuff to him. So he said, you know what? The Assyrian shall be his king, because they refuse to return. Now that's the difference between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, because don't get me wrong, the southern kingdom bugged out too. The southern kingdom did a lot worse. But when it was brought to the southern kingdom's attention, they always repented and turned back to the Most High. Although they still received their punishment, they always came back. The northern kingdom didn't come back. This is the reason why they're called the lost tribes of Israel. They did not want to return. Now, jumping all the way back to Hosea 1, verses 6 through 9, right? And we're going to see exactly how they became Gentiles, right? We saw how they refused to return, because this section was to show how that they refused to return and how to show that how they became Gentiles and wanderers among the nations. So we jump all the way back to Hosea 1, verses 6 through 9, using line upon line. And it says, and she conceived again. Now remember, in the second part, we read how he had a son named Jezreel. that the Most High told him to take a whore and have children. And the first son he had was Jezreel. And he said, name him Jezreel, for I will avenge the death of Jezreel from the house of Jehu, and I will cause the kingdom of Israel to cease, right? So now he had told him to have another child, and he had a daughter, right? And it says, and she conceived again and bare a daughter. And Yah said unto him, call her name Loruhamah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. But I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by Yah their Elohim, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen. Now when she had weaned Loruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. Then Yah said, call his name Lo-Ami, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your Elohim. Now let's look at this with real studious or eyes and see what we can pull out of this, right? So the daughter, he said, name her Loruhamah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel. Now remember when I told you in Romans 30 that he's talking to the Gentiles and he tell them, because of your unbelief, you didn't have mercy. You weren't given mercy because of your unbelief, right? But through their disbelief, you are now granted mercy, right? Well, this is the people who weren't given mercy, right? We also saw how they were the people who didn't believe. In 2 Kings 17, it said that they didn't believe like their fathers. Now he also said right here, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, right? So he did say that he will have mercy upon the house of Judah, because the house of Judah always turned back. They always repented and came back, right? And he said, so when we get to verse 9, he said, call his name Lo-Ami, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your Elohim. How do we know that he's just talking about Israel and not Israel and the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom? And this is how. In verse 7, he said, but I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, right? But he said he's not going to have mercy on the house of Israel. So he said, ye are not my people, and I will not be your Elohim. So if he is not your people, if you are not his people, and he is not your Elohim, what does that make you? That makes you a heathen. That makes you a Gentile in the non-Hebrew sense of the word. Remember, there was the Gentile meant nations, right? It meant people. Um, it's usually of non-Hebrew, right? But it could also mean Israelites. Now, when you are no longer his people, and he is no longer your God, you are a Gentile. You are a non-Hebrew Gentile in his eyes. You are a heathen. That's just flat out right in your face, right there. And through all of this, using line upon line, like I said, at the end of this, there should be no doubt that the northern kingdom became Gentiles / heathens. So let's continue. Now, let's go to Hosea chapter 9, verse 16 through 17. Again, using line upon line, right? In verse 16, it says, Ephraim is smitten, their root is dried up, they shall bear no fruit. Yea, though they bring forth, yet will I slay even the beloved fruit of their womb. My Yah will cast them away, because they did not hearken unto him. And they shall be wanderers among the nations. So we know Ephraim is the northern kingdom, right? He said he will reject their children, right? So he said that not only he's going to reject their children, but he's going to slay the fruit of their womb, which is their children, right? And he will cast them away, and they shall be wanderers among the nations. So that's where they were during the time of Hamashiach. That's where they were during the time of the apostles, when James writes his epistle to the 12 tribes scattered abroad, right? Because the northern kingdom, as well as some of the southern kingdom, we'll get into that in part 4. But for this purpose of this lesson, the northern kingdom was scattered among the nations. They were wanderers among the nations. Like I said, if you remember when Hamashiach was talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and he said to them, "Where I go, you shall not follow." And then they questioned amongst themselves, and they said, "Well, where shall he go? Shall he go to the Gentiles that are among the Gentiles?" Right? He said, "Shall he go to the Gentiles and teach those that are among the Gentiles?" It's two different Gentiles right there. And now you see how. Because he said in Hosea 9, verse 17, that they shall be wanderers or Gentiles among the Gentiles or nations. Right? These are who the apostles were sent to, including Paul. But the difference is the other epistles were sent to the Jew Gentiles, the Gentiles who used to be Jews, right? Who became Hellenists. That's who they were sent to. And Paul was sent to the Gentiles of the northern kingdom. And we're going to eventually show all that. But this, for the purpose of this lesson, we can see that the northern kingdom was surely Gentiles during the time of the Messiah that he walked the earth, right? They were wanderers among the nations, and that they would come back to the Most High in the latter days. The latter days wasn't during the time Hamashiach walked the earth. We're in the latter days now, right? So that should be real clear to you when it says that they shall be wanderers among the nations. And here's the final verse, right? I believe this is the final verse. It might be one more slide after that. Oh, yeah. Well, this is the final verse of this section showing how they became Gentiles, right? So, again, using line upon line, we jump to Hosea 8 and 8, right? And it says, Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. So they're swallowed up. Now, remember, in part 1 of Neither Jew nor Gentiles, we read that the northern kingdom was assimilated or absorbed by the other nations, right? And never returned. That's exactly what Hosea 8 and 8 is saying. He said Israel, which is the northern kingdom, is swallowed up or absorbed or assimilated among the Gentiles as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. That should be clear that the northern kingdom became Gentiles. They were divorced by the Most High. Their children were rejected by the Most High. He took away their king. He took away their feast days. He took away their Sabbaths, right? He took away he stopped punishing them, right? He sentenced them, he cut them off. He sentenced them to be wanderers among the nations, right? That they shall be swallowed up by the Gentiles, right? Now, I know all of it sounds cruel and everything, but like I said, if you remember in Genesis 48, it was already prophesied that this would happen. So these are the things that led up to this. Remember, the Most High declares the end from the beginning, right? So this is how that prophecy in Genesis 48 of them becoming a multitude of nations with an S at the end of it, meaning plural, came to pass because of this. It started with their rejecting of the covenant, worshiping other gods, being harlots, right? Serving Baal, right? And refusing to return, which led to them becoming Gentiles, which is what they wanted to become anyway. So now we're going to go into the last section to see, okay, well, when exactly do they come back, right? You know, because some people might still believe that they came back during the time of Hamashiach, right? So let's see. So now we're going to go and see how they will be betrothed in the wilderness, which is an event that has not taken place yet. And to verify that, we're going to go back to Hosea 2, right? Verses 14 through 23, using line upon line. Now it says, therefore, behold, I will allure her. He's talking about the northern kingdom, right? And bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her. And I will give her her vineyards from thence, and the valley of Acre for a door of hope. And she shall sing there, as in the days of her youth, and as in the days when she came up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be at that day, saith Yah, that thou shalt call me Ishi, and shalt call me no more Baali. For I will take away the names of Baalim out of her mouth, and they shall no more be remembered by their name. So the Most High, he said he's going to lure Israel into the wilderness. Now, this Israel right here is really all 12 tribes, right? And how do we know it's all 12 tribes? It said, as in when she came up out of the land of Egypt, all 12 tribes came up out of the land of Egypt, right? So he said he will bring her back into the wilderness and and allure her into the wilderness, and he will speak comfortably unto her and give her back her vineyards and all those things that he took away from her, right? And she will call him Ishi, which is in Hebrew means husband. Now remember, he already in prior to this, he said that she's no longer my wife. He is no longer her husband. But he's saying when he bring her to the wilderness again, he will bring her. He will be her husband again. And to further prove that, we'll just finish out these verses with verses 18 through 20 first, right? He says, and in that day will I make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field and with the fowls of heaven and with the creeping things out of the ground. And I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the earth and will make them to lie down safely. And I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness and in judgment, and in loving kindness, and in mercies. And I will even betroth thee unto me in faithfulness, and thou shalt know Yah. Now, this is proof, if you got eyes to see, that they couldn't have been with the southern kingdom during the time of Hamashiach. Not only did we learn that the term Jew meant southern kingdom, so and it never applied to the northern kingdom, but this should also prove that. It says, I will betroth thee unto me forever. Okay, so they couldn't have been betrothed to him forever if Jerusalem fell in 70 AD and they were scattered, right? Because he said, I will betroth thee unto me forever, not until Jerusalem falls in 7 AD, and I will rescatter you. He didn't gather them all back to only rescatter them back into the Gentiles when Jerusalem fell in 70 AD, right? So we know that this hasn't happened yet because when Israel returns, Israel will return forever, and they will never be chased out of the land again. They'll be there forever. They will lie down safely, right? So let's finish these last two verses, verses 21 through 23. And it says, and it shall come to pass in that day, I will hear, saith the Lord, saith Yah, I will hear the heavens, and they shall hear the earth, and the earth shall hear the corn, and the wine, and the oil, and they shall hear Jezreel. And I will serve her unto me in the earth, and I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy. And I will say to them which are not my people, thou art my people. And they shall say, thou art my Elohim. Right? So this is the redemption. This is the marriage. This is the reconcilement of Israel back to the Most High Yah. Right? Now, in that day, when he said it shall come to pass in that day, remember, that's the same thing that we talking about, because it's the same passages in Hosea 2, 14 through 23. He says, in that day that he brings her to the wilderness, right? Nowhere in history do we know of Israel going into the wilderness again after leaving Egypt. So this hasn't happened yet. That should be very clear. So in that day is when they come back to the wilderness. He said, I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy. Again, going back to the book of Romans, when Paul said to the Gentiles, he said, okay, because of your unbelief, you weren't granted mercy, but because of their disbelief, meaning the southern kingdom's disbelief, you are now granted mercy, right? That's what that's saying right here in Hosea 2. I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy. Who hasn't obtained mercy? We read in Hosea 1 that he said, name her Leruhamah, for I will no longer have mercy upon the house of Israel. So even when you get into the New Testament, you're going to realize that who Paul is talking to is the northern kingdom, right? And he said, and I will say to them which are not my people, thou art my people. Now, everybody reads that part of the New Testament. He said, well, he will take a people who's not a people and make them his people. And they think they're talking about the Japhites. They think that they're talking about, the children of Japh or the Europeans or anybody, the natural born Gentile, right? But if you use it line upon line, right, you will see that he's talking to the northern kingdom. And that's who he has been talking to the whole time. So now we see how the northern kingdom have become Gentile, and I've given you a little bit of information showing you, in the New Testament who Paul was talking to. I will get into that a little bit later, but the next lesson will be part 4. And in part 4, we're going to go over how the southern kingdom became Gentiles, because they had a different process when they became Gentiles, right? Because some of them became Hellenized. Some of them took on the customs of the Gentiles, much like the northern kingdom did, right? But not all of them did, because the Most High said he will have mercy on Judah. So he brought Judah back, and Judah remained with him until 70 AD, when all had to be fulfilled and they were to be scattered into all kingdoms of the earth. So we'll go over that in part 3, but in the meantime, this is the end of, we'll go over that in part 4, but this is the end of part 3, how the northern kingdom became Gentiles. And like I said, I'm sorry about the length, but I wanted to show you how they became a divorced wife, how their children were rejected, how their feast days were taken away, how their Sabbaths was taken away, how their kings and their princes and their priests were taken away, how their sacrifices were rejected, how they were prophesied to become Gentiles, and how they were cursed to become wanderers among the nations and a vessel wherein there is no pleasure. So I hope at the end of this, now that we've reached the end, you got a clear and thorough understanding of exactly how the northern kingdom became Gentiles. And with that said, I want to say all praises to the Most High Yah, in the name of his only begotten Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, and Shalom, Israel.
Stay focused. Yeah, how we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused. Don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused. It's for like blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused. Hebrew, we got next. I preach the McKells and eggs. Stay focused. Yeah, how we choose, we worship in spirit and truth. Stay focused. Don't be a fool. Study to show thyself approved. Stay focused. It's for like blood in my chest. The word manifested in flesh. Stay focused. Hebrew, we got next. So never abandon your post.